My little brother, George, was the guy everyone was obsessed with. The aloof valedictorian had a secret crush on him. The sweet boy next door took care of his every need. Everyone I knew would fall madly in love with him. He was the moon in the sky, and his light just made me look like a patch of darkness. They'd say, "Miles, you're nothing but scum in the gutter. You're not even fit to shine your brother's shoes." So, filled with self-loathing, I gave up everything and transferred to a school in the next city over. But then they all came crawling back, clinging to me like they were crazy, refusing to let go. I got a new brother the year I turned 18. It was the middle of a brutal summer. I was walking home with my childhood friend, Jason. He handed me a cold bottle of water and smiled. "I hear things are pretty different at your place now." I twisted the cap, took a swig, and shrugged. "It's the same thing every day. What's so different?" But when I got home and pushed aside the worn-out curtain hanging in the doorway, a wave of cool air hit me. I froze. I couldn't believe my dad, who was always pinching pennies, had actually turned on the AC. I stepped inside and heard a woman's soft, gentle voice. A strange woman with stylish, curly hair was sitting on the sofa. Her voice was as smooth as silk, with a subtle southern lilt. When she saw me, she smiled and stood up, reaching for my backpack. "You must be Miles. You look so sweet. It just breaks my heart." I was stunned by how familiar she sounded and glanced over at my dad. He cleared his throat. The graying hair at his temples was freshly dyed, making him look sharp and cheerful. His normally stern face was softened with a hint of affection. He said, "Miles, this is your Aunt Sharon." I think I understood. The backpack slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a loud thud. Just then, the sliding door to the kitchen opened. A boy who looked completely out of place in our shabby 3-bedroom apartment walked out. He was tall and slender, graceful as a reed. Beneath his slightly messy hair was a pair of cool, dark eyes. He nodded and smiled at me. In that instant, it was like a cool breeze sweeping over a mountain ridge. Even the small mole under his eye seemed to come alive. He said, "Hi, Miles." And that was it. The first time I met George. My stepmom and dad's wedding was in September. At the reception, George, dressed in a tuxedo, played a piece on the cello. The soft light fell on his elegant figure, making his profile look as perfect as carved jade. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. He stood up, gave the audience a slight smile, and bowed. From then on, the family had another amazing child. My father's admiring gaze was fixed on George. My stepmom smiled gently and stroked his dark hair. But George walked through the crowd and found me in the corner. His pale fingers wrapped around my skinny wrist. The smile on his handsome face was dazzling. "Brother, I'm looking forward to getting to know you." A few days later, school started. I saw George again in my class. The homeroom teacher introduced him to everyone, his name written in neat script on the blackboard. He smiled and greeted the class, then bowed politely, earning a loud round of applause from the whole room. The teacher said, "George has transferred from Northwood High. He's an excellent student, so please don't hesitate to ask him for help." George was given a prime seat. It was known as the Golden Spot because it had the best light and a great view. More importantly, the school's untouchable ice prince, Evan, also sat there. Evan was a legend at our school. Good grades, a wealthy family, and stunning looks. Even though his family had the money to donate 3 new buildings to the school, he never looked down on anyone. He was just consistently cold to everyone. But now, Evan, the cool and elegant prince, was actually looking at someone for the first time. He nodded at George and pushed a fresh worksheet toward him. "Do this." The unapproachable academic god had finally descended from his pedestal, and the whole class was in awe. During the break, a crowd gathered around my desk. Chloe, a good friend of mine, asked with wide, curious eyes, "Miles, is he really your brother?" Others chimed in from all sides. "How come we never heard you had a brother? Do you have his number? My friend wants it." Pfft, asking for a friend. "Miles, just give it to me." My desk was in the forgotten corner of the classroom, usually ignored. Now, it was mobbed by students firing off questions. It had been a long time since I'd talked to so many people at once. My face flushed as I managed to answer a few simple questions. Before I could give out his number, someone knocked sharply on my desk. I looked up. I was met with Shane's impatient, handsome face. He shoved the other students aside and plopped down in the seat across from me. On his ruggedly handsome face, a thick eyebrow arched. "Miles, tell me about your brother." I had a crush on Shane. Young love is often that simple. I liked him because he was my hero, descending from the heavens when I was in trouble. Back then, I was cornered in the bathroom by some punks with bleached hair, my face smeared with dirty water. He was the one who kicked the door open, took down a dozen of them, and got me out of there. Later, I once asked Shane, "Why did you save me?" He just raised an eyebrow at me and spread his hands. Felt like it. From that day on, my heart finally had someone to beat for. But now, that same person was leaning in close. He arched a thick eyebrow, his light, clear eyes filled with endless curiosity. My fingertips trembled slightly. Just then, someone pushed through the surrounding crowd and came over to us. It was George. He was wearing his tailored school uniform, which made his shoulders look broader and his waist narrower. But his beautiful features were frosted with an icy chill. His lips, as red as flower petals, uttered a few words. "I don't like people sharing my private information." His statement caused an uproar. The students' curious gazes instantly turned into a thick, palpable disgust. Ugh, what kind of brother sells out his own siblings' privacy? I heard he's a stepbrother. They probably don't get along. George is so amazing. He must be really jealous of him. I stood there, feeling the weight of 1,000 glares, a cold sweat trickling down my back. No explanation would work now. That thick, inexplicable malice enveloped me, suffocating me. Chloe, who used to love talking to me, was now glaring at me. Shane was looking at me with a blank expression. And George, the cause of it all, only stayed for a moment before turning and walking away. His life was like a spotlight. Wherever he went, people's attention and love followed. And I was doomed to be the timid rat scurrying in the gutter, just watching it all happen. The hostility towards me grew. First, it was my worksheets torn to shreds the moment I got them. Then my backpack was stained with ink. Soon it escalated. A disgusting dead mouse appeared in my desk drawer. I grabbed it by its long, thin tail and threw it in the trash. A low ripple of laughter spread through the classroom. I looked around, but I couldn't tell who did it. They were all staring at me, their eyes full of mockery. I went back to my seat and frantically wiped my hands with disinfectant wipes. My hands were red and raw, but the sickening urge to vomit wouldn't go away. I finally understood. You can wash away the feel of a dead mouse, but you can never get rid of the look of contempt. After school, for the first time, I couldn't help but go find Jason. On the small path home, I poured out all my frustrations from the past few days. But when we walked under a streetlight, I suddenly noticed his expression was unfamiliar. Under the pale yellow light, his normally gentle eyes no longer held any sympathy. Instead, they were filled with annoyance and blame. Annoyance at my constant complaining. Blame for my supposed malice towards George. Jason said, "Miles, I don't know when you changed. George is new here, he's sensitive about everything. You're his older brother. Can't you be a little more tolerant?" He called me Miles, but he used George's nickname. Suddenly, Jason felt like a stranger. So much of a stranger that it was as if we hadn't spent the last decade growing up together. We had promised to be friends forever, that nothing would ever change between us, not even if the seas ran dry. But now he was frowning his handsome brow over George, criticizing my every move. You never wait for him after school. In class, you even let an outsider like Evan help him with math. And Shane, you let someone so dangerous get near him. His sharp words stabbed me again and again. My heart was bleeding, shattered into a million pieces, impossible to put back together. Jason listed off a dozen of my supposed failings as if he were reciting a grocery list. He looked down and suddenly saw my tear-filled eyes. He froze. My lips trembled as I asked him, "Jason, you're my best friend. How could you, of all people, be so firmly on George's side?" But Jason just hesitated for a second, then frowned again. He said, I say a few words and you can't take it. Do you have any idea how much pressure George is under every day? Under the streetlight, his words grew harsher. Finally, he threw down one last, brutal line. Miles, you're scum in the gutter. You're not even fit to shine your brother's shoes. I stood outside my front door for half an hour, letting the cold wind dry my tears before I pushed the door open. The dim yellow light was on inside. My dad was reading the newspaper on the sofa, and my stepmom was busy in the kitchen. The sound of the door opening startled my dad. He looked up, his eyes filled with disgust. So late. Who knows where you've been messing around? With that, he gave the newspaper a sharp shake and snorted. Running around with good-for-nothings all day. Why can't you be more like your brother? George happened to be passing by with a glass of warm milk. He slowed his steps at the comment, his eyes curving into a slight smile. I missed his gaze. My dad suddenly threw down the newspaper and stood up, the muscles in his arms bulging. Are you ignoring me now? Hearing the noise, my stepmom hurried out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron to block my furious father. She coaxed him softly. Maybe something happened while he was out. It's late. Let's just have some peace and quiet. While holding him back, she turned to me. Miles, go to your room. Drink that glass of warm milk and get to sleep early. I fought back tears for a long time. I just managed a silent okay. Walking across the old wooden floor, I glanced at George's closed bedroom door. He knew everything, yet he did nothing. I closed my door, as if shutting the door to my own dark, damp heart. The glass of warm milk my stepmom gave me only made me feel more out of place. I hated George, but I didn't hate this mother figure who had come into my life 18 years late. Before drifting off, I pinched my wrist again, telling myself that tomorrow would be better. But in my fitful sleep, it sounded like the upstairs neighbor's faucet was dripping again. Along with the dripping sound, there was a soft click of a door closing. A shadow stood silently in my bedroom. Moonlight streamed through the window. The shirt on the figure was pathologically wrinkled, and his handsome face was lost in shadow. A burning, obsessive gaze. Inch by inch, it licked over every part of my skin. In my sleep, it was as if I were being watched by a giant python, unable to rest peacefully. The slippers were gently kicked aside. A cold body squeezed in next to me, pressing close. A hand fumbled over to intertwine its fingers with mine. In my vague struggle, I heard a light, faint whisper, "Brother." I woke up the next morning feeling off, but I checked the bed carefully and couldn't find anything poking me. In the end, I had to blame it on a nightmare. I shivered, thinking of the cold, coiling snake from my dream. When I bent down to reach for my slippers, I noticed they were kicked far away. I paused. Did I kick them that hard last night? But before I could think too much, there was a soft knock on the door. My stepmom's gentle voice called out, "Miles, you're up. I made breakfast. Come eat while it's hot." I opened the door and saw George, already dressed and ready to leave. His long, narrow eyes were cold and devoid of any emotion, except for the captivating mole under his eye. I thought to myself that, with a face like that, it was no wonder everyone in class loved him. There's a reason why some people are so popular. It was as if the world's light favored him, shining a little extra on him. And me? I was like a reviled rat in the gutter. George's gaze didn't land on me. He said softly, "Mom, I'm leaving." Then he opened the door and walked out without hesitation. My stepmom was dishing out porridge for me. She quickly put it down and ran out the door. She frowned prettily. This kid, he forgot his medicine again. Not wanting to make things difficult for her, I swallowed the last bite of my breakfast wrap and stood up. "Aunt Sharon, I'll take it to him." She hesitated for a moment, then finally nodded. I stood there and watched as she retrieved a bag of medicine from the very back of a drawer. The bag was solid black plastic, opaque, and tied very tightly. My stepmom urged, "This medicine is extremely important." For the first time, a troubled look appeared on her gentle face. "Miles, can I ask you a favor? Please don't open it, and don't let anyone else see it." I stared at her, and for a moment, I saw the face of the mother I'd never known. Finally, I gave a silent nod. Okay. I took the bag of medicine to school. On the short walk, it felt like Pandora's box, tempting me to open it. My intuition told me there was something significant inside. Something that might be the key to George's secret. The only secret of the seemingly perfect, unbeatable George. My heart pounded. A voice in my head told me that opening it was the only way to defeat him. But I hesitated, thinking of my stepmom's face. She was nothing like my violent father, she was as gentle as water. I clutched the bag, squeezing it over and over, but I never opened it. When I got to the classroom, I started looking for George, but the bullying directed at me today seemed a bit over the top. The moment I walked in, a bucket of water dumped down on me from above. Laughter erupted. I was soaked to the bone. In the dead of winter, my heart turned colder faster than my body. Directly in front of me was Shane, laughing without a care in the world. He was sitting with his legs crossed, a pen spinning between his long fingers, leaning over to joke with George. His thin lips moved, and it looked like he was saying, "George, look at him. Isn't he ridiculous?" I froze, letting the cold air cut through me, chilling my already broken heart. Just then, a cool voice came from behind me. "Excuse me." A tiny spark of hope ignited in my heart. Who was it? At this moment, if anyone had said just one word for me, I would have worshipped them as a god and offered them my pathetic devotion. But the cool voice simply finished its sentence. "Excuse me, you're in the way." I slowly turned to face Evan's cold expression. His indifferent eyes held a trace of impatience. I felt like a robot, stripped of all emotion, following orders to be obedient. So I stiffly moved aside, clearing a path for Evan. He walked straight to the seat beside George. George happened to look up, a smile playing on his lips as he watched me. I managed a smile that was uglier than a grimace. "George, I need to talk to you." The bell was about to ring, and the hallway was empty. George and I stood facing each other. I was dripping wet, clutching the bag of medicine tightly, my head bowed. "George, your medicine." George gently took the bag, his bewitching voice suddenly speaking up. "Brother, did you look inside?" I looked up slowly, meeting his eyes, which were like black glass. In them, I saw my own dusty, pathetic reflection. I wiped away a tear and said fiercely, "George, I hate you." Yes, I hate George. I had finally said it. I threw the bag at him and turned, running down the hallway. The loud school bell crashed down on me, making my ears ache. I ran through the sound of the bell, bumping into countless shocked teachers along the way. But I didn't care anymore. Right now, all I wanted was to escape the mockery and malice of that classroom. I was never popular, but before, no one went out of their way to target me. No one would dump water on me just to please someone else. George's arrival had shattered everything. A series of images flashed through my mind, all from after he arrived. Everyone seemed to love him, to indulge him unconditionally. Beauty, in the midst of so many dull, gray adolescent lives, seemed so conspicuous, always giving its owner the power to command. The executioners who bully others are often arrogant and domineering, and the bullied are just ordinary, lost in the crowd. I shoved open the bathroom door and hid in the last stall. The mirror like glass reflected my dejected face and soaked clothes. Compared to the elegant and beautiful George, I was like an ugly duckling, forever insecure, forever ordinary, forever ignored. I stared at myself in the mirror and wiped away a tear. Just then, the stall door suddenly shook. A taunting, thuggish voice came from outside. "Stop hiding. Come on out. I know you're in there." Without Shane to protect me, the bullies had found me again. In the small bathroom stall, they grabbed my hair and shoved my head into the sink. The gurgling water was the sound of my helpless struggle. I was pulled up by my hair at the moment of near death. The punk with the bleached hair sneered, "No one's here to protect you now, huh?" My head was forced back underwater. The punk's hand was steady, holding me down firmly. For a second, I thought I was going to die. But I didn't. On the verge of death, I heard that familiar, deep voice again. He said, "Hold on." It was Shane. The bleached hair punk was so scared he instantly let go, stumbling back several steps, a fawning smile on his face. Shane, you. But Shane just stood there, one hand in his pocket. His dark eyes were calm, without a trace of emotion. He didn't gently pull me out, nor did he knock the punk down like before. He just stood there calmly, like a complete stranger just passing by. He said, "Excuse me." So we were just blocking his way. In that instant, my childhood hero shattered into a million tiny bubbles. Shane didn't even glance at me as he walked into the bathroom. The punk spat on the floor and walked towards me with a menacing grin. I struggled awake from a nightmare. The air was thick with the smell of disinfectant, and the noise of the hospital rushed into my ears. I stared blankly at the scene before me. My stepmom was slumped over my bed, her eyes red from crying. The gray at my dad's temples seemed to have multiplied, and the lines around his mouth were deeper. George wasn't there. I thought it was all just a nightmare. But when I lifted my hand, the one with the 4, I saw it was covered in bruises. The beating wasn't a dream. When my stepmom saw I was awake, the tears flowed even faster. She sobbed, "Miles, I'm so sorry." My dad turned his face toward me, his expression grave. So they knew everything. I gently lowered my hand and looked out the window. The sun was so bright, but I was gray from head to toe. I only managed to say a few words. "I want to transfer." My stepmom froze, then nodded frantically, wiping her eyes. Okay, I promise." My dad's lips trembled, as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he said nothing. The wind was cold and bleak. I was left alone in the hospital. Adults have their own busy lives. The fact that they could arrange this for me was already a huge effort. Late that night, I pulled the 4 needle out of my hand and went home alone. George's door was shut, but I could hear a fierce argument from inside. My usually gentle stepmom's voice was shrill, hysterically accusing him of something. The sound of a glass shattering was piercing. I closed my door, shutting everything out. 3 days later, George went to school. I didn't. My dad took me to a strange city. I heard this was my mom's hometown. They had built a life here, spending 6 happy years together. Until my mom died in childbirth, having me. Then everything changed. My dad took me to my grandma's old apartment building and, looking at the dusty, old things filling the room, he asked me, "Can you live on your own?" My eyes swept over the dusty bowls and chopsticks, over the picture of the smiling woman on the wall, and I nodded. Yes. He looked at me with a complicated expression, counted out a few dozen bills for me, and left in a hurry, as if he couldn't wait to get rid of a troublesome piece of trash. I took the money and, standing on a stool, took down the woman's picture. I used a cloth to wipe the dust off the surface. As I wiped, tears suddenly fell. I was struck by how much I looked like her. We were both just as tragic, both just as pitiful. I didn't touch the money my dad gave me. Instead, I found the crumpled bills I had saved up myself. It wasn't much. I used it to buy groceries and some daily necessities. With the few dollars left, I thought about it and went to an old barbershop to get a haircut. Inside the old, worn-out shop, the old barber put a cape around me and asked what kind of haircut I wanted. I said, "Anything new is fine. Anything new would be fine." I wasn't asking for anything else. I just wanted to say goodbye to my bleak past. I had no desire to become some dazzling, brilliant person. One dazzling person, George, was enough. But when the old barber took off the cape and had me look at myself in the mirror, I was stunned. I was 18, and I'd never been as sensitive and weepy as I had been this year. But I couldn't help it. The boy in the mirror had a somewhat reserved expression. But his gloomy, long hair had been cut short, and his bangs were trimmed into fine, wispy pieces, revealing long, slightly down-turned eyes. Those eyes were like something carefully drawn in a classical painting, like a single peach blossom petal, reserved and full of charm. A completely different person from the old Miles. He looked like a piece of carefully protected porcelain. Even with his underlying sadness, he was so captivating you couldn't look away. The old man pulled away the cape, and snippets of hair fell to the floor. He smiled at me, every wrinkle on his face spreading with kindness. "Don't be sad, son." He handed the money back to me and patted my shoulder. "No charge. It's on me." I walked back to that old apartment alone, carrying my groceries. Looking at the small but cozy layout of the place, I suddenly began to imagine what my mom was like. Was she gentle like Aunt Sharon? Or was she frank and spirited like Jason's mom? But there were too many gaps in my memory. I couldn't picture her. That night, I curled up on the bed my mom once slept in and, for the first time in a long time, felt a sense of warmth. I slept so soundly, I didn't even notice. The phone I'd left on the nightstand lit up, then went dark, over and over. A name flashed madly on the caller ID, but the call was never answered. The name on the screen was George. The next day, I woke with a start. I realized my phone, left on the nightstand, had died from a drained battery. I pressed the power button a few times, but it didn't respond. Seeing that it was almost time for school, I decided to leave it behind. Worried about being late on my first day and leaving a bad impression on my teachers, I ran faster than usual. At the main gate, I bumped right into a boy. He was tall and thin, and the skin visible outside his uniform was so pale it glowed. The scent of mint hit me. I didn't dare to look up, just mumbled an apology and hurried away. He stood there, seeming to watch me for a long time. When I reached the classroom door, I saw a bustling room full of people and hesitated, not daring to go in. Memories are like a dark, damp, rainy season. Just thinking about them brings a dull, persistent ache to my heart. But then someone stood behind me. When his shadow fell over mine, I flinched. I remembered being coldly reprimanded by Evan in front of the class before. I was in someone's way again. Even starting over, I was still just as annoying. My shoulders slowly tensed. I shuffled to the side, my voice as quiet as a mosquito's buzz. "I'm sorry, But a pair of cool, gentle hands rested on my shoulders. A voice like mint candy in summer, like a breeze brushing past my ear, said. He said, "Don't be afraid. Go on in. Everyone's waiting for you." I slowly looked up and met his eyes. He had a similar face to Evan's, the same cool, jade-like elegance. But his long, phoenix-like eyes held no piercing chill. No contempt, no disgust, only calmness. The newcomer smiled, his eyes curving, and his cool features came alive. He held out his hand to me. I'm Frank." When Frank led me into the classroom, the noisy room suddenly fell silent. I stood by the teacher's desk, anxiously looking at the classroom, which seemed to be on pause. Gazes of all kinds landed on me, mixed with different emotions. In a daze, I felt like I was back where I started. But this time, something felt a little different. The first person to cheer was a petite girl. She curved her round eyes and smiled at me. "It's the new student." Her voice snapped the other students out of their daze. They quickly surrounded me, their faces full of simple curiosity. "You're the new student Ms. Lewis was talking about? I heard you transferred from the city over. That must have been tough. Let's exchange numbers." I was a bit overwhelmed by their unexpected warmth. I blushed and tried to respond to them one by one. But Frank stopped me. The boy shook his head at the curious students crowding around, like calming a group of kittens. "There's plenty of time. You can get to know him slowly." The students he'd calmed down were very reasonable and nodded in agreement. "That's right. We've got all the time in the world. He's not going anywhere." The bell rang, and everyone returned to their seats. The teacher assigned me a desk bathed in sunlight. Frank sat right in front of me. I looked at the boy's straight posture and was reminded of a tall, elegant bamboo stalk. After class, the homeroom teacher called me to her office. She was a serious woman with half-frame glasses and a no-nonsense demeanor. She spoke to me while grading papers. "I'm aware of your previous situation. Please rest assured, that kind of thing will absolutely not happen in my class. If you run into any trouble, remember to find a teacher. Or find Frank. He's the class president. He'll help you." I slowly nodded. When I pushed open the office door, Frank was standing right outside. Seeing me, he said, "I'll take you to get your materials." I nodded and thanked him, but as I looked at his back, I couldn't help but ask, "Frank, have we met before?" His footsteps paused. The sun was setting, and a gorgeous, rosy glow slanted in from the side, enveloping Frank's slender figure. He slowly turned around and smiled at me. "We have, but it seems you've forgotten. Frank and I had indeed met before. We pieced it together from the few memories we both had. Back then, he was visiting his grandmother for the summer when he was kidnapped. The trafficker took him to the convenience store downstairs from my building to buy cigarettes, which was when I ran into them while going out to buy popsicles with Jason. I looked at the trafficker. He was fierce and menacing, and Frank, who was being held by him, didn't look willing at all. Most importantly, at that time, I was convinced that such an ugly kidnapper could not have produced such a beautiful child as Frank. So I told Jason to run home and call the police while I stayed behind to deal with the situation. The trafficker kicked me around like a rag doll, but I held on to him and wouldn't let go. At that time, the cartoon Pikaka the Little Hero was a huge hit on TV. I told myself I had to be brave just like Pikaka, so I endured the pain and didn't cry. But Frank held on to me and sobbed. It wasn't until the police arrived and separated us. I never saw Jason. I just limped home. When I got home, my dad had come back drunk. He saw my bruises and spat, always getting into fights. He kicked me. I struggled to get up and wash the dishes. But I never saw Frank again. Later, I asked the police officer, and he said Frank had gone back to his own family. And that summer, Pikaka the Little Hero aired its final episode. Looking back now, that was probably one of the few brave moments of my life. My most passionate, bravest self was all spent in that period. The years that followed were a decade of darkness and gloom. And now, Frank, bathed in the sunset's glow, said to me, "You were very brave." I was a bit dazed. He stood in the sunlight, yet he was brighter than the sun itself. But I used to be that dazzling, too. I cried again. I was probably not a brave person, always crying over little things. But I wiped the tears from my eyes and said to Frank, my voice choked with emotion, "Thank you. Thank you for helping me find the person I used to be." The few months I lived in Crestwood were some of the happiest times of my life. I still went to school every day, but I met people who were different from those in the first half of my life. The neighbors were all elderly people who had known my grandparents. When they saw me, they'd sigh and say, "You've grown so big." Then they'd compete to give me fresh fruits and vegetables. I would refuse, but they would insist, their hands waving faster than anyone's. "It's just a little something. Don't mention it." In my class, the students were all good people. Their grades weren't as good as in my old class, but they were happy. The first girl to greet me was named Sarah. After we got to know each other, she would bring me stacks of romance comics. She pointed to the handsome boy on the cover and said to me, "You look a lot like him." I looked down at the comic book character. Black hair, curved eyes, and smooth, porcelain white skin. He was surrounded by a colorful halo, like the adoring gazes of thousands of fans. He looked much more like George than me. I told Sarah, "He doesn't look like me. He looks like my brother. He's a charmer, too." The title of the comic was The One Everyone Loves. But Sarah shook her head like a tambourine. "Not him. You." She gave me the same bright, radiant smile as when we first met. A rose isn't a rose the moment it sprouts. A swan isn't a swan the moment it's born. In our lives, we all have to walk through a silent childhood, a transformative youth, and many confusing days mixed with darkness and light before we can become our true selves. I was stunned by her words. She clutched her comic and scampered away. I mulled over her words. When I turned around, I heard someone calling my name. Frank was wearing a crisp summer uniform, his neck long and pale, looking like a character from 1,000 Girls' Dreams. He said, "Wanna walk home together?" Frank's family must have been very wealthy. Every day after school, a Maybach would be parked far away to pick him up. But he was never arrogant, always walking a distance by himself before getting in the car. But even for someone from a wealthy family, no matter how humble they are, their inherent elegance is impossible to hide. I saw a shadow of George in him. I also saw shadows of Evan and Jason. But now I no longer had my old self-pity. I asked Frank, "Do you know Evan?" He smiled. He's my cousin. When I was little and went to my grandmother's house, he was there too. He added nonchalantly he was a typical kid, always trying to copy me. I thought of George. He always had a certain youthful arrogance about him. Even if he seemed aloof on the surface, there was always a sense of pride. Not like me at all. After saying goodbye to Frank, I slung my backpack over my shoulder and slowly walked home along the path I came. I used to always wait for Jason to walk home with me, but after transferring, I politely declined other students' invitations and chose to walk home alone. I figured Jason could finally take care of George like he wanted. He probably didn't need an unremarkable person like me around anymore. However, as I walked deeper down the small path, a figure appeared at the end. His face was haggard, his gentle eyes were bloodshot. When he saw me, he took a step forward without thinking. Miles. Seeing someone from hundreds of miles away appear before me, my first reaction was to run. But I didn't get far before he cornered me in a narrow alley. Jason looked much worse for wear, as if he'd been through a lot. He trapped me in a tight hug. His whole body was trembling, but his hands holding me were steady. Word by word, he spoke into my ear. Miles, Miles, I can't live without you. I accidentally brushed against the skin of his fingertips and found them ice cold. The usually elegant and self-possessed Jason was like a different person. He held me tightly, and no matter how much I struggled, he wouldn't let go. My face was cold as I slapped him. Jason, you're insane. The slap seemed to snap him out of it, and he slowly let go of me. I looked at him with disgust, pulled a tissue Frank had given me from my backpack, and wiped my hands. You said you didn't want to see me. I left, and now you're acting like you're gonna die? I admit I was blind to be your friend for the last 10+ years. Now we're even. You don't have to bother me anymore. Okay? Maybe it was the people and things I had encountered these past few days that had helped me gradually accept myself. Now, facing Jason, I wasn't so weak and passive. Jason stared at me, as if seeing me for the first time. Miles, you've changed. I said, yes, I've changed. If I were still the same as before, wouldn't that be exactly what you all wanted? I gave a sarcastic smile. Jason, our friendship of over a decade is worth less than a few weeks of knowing someone. How can you even call yourself my friend? My words hit him hard. From the looks of it, he had probably rushed over from the next city overnight, not even having time to change out of his school uniform. But I no longer felt the same worry I used to. Instead, I felt a sense of relief. The wind blew the tissue away, taking with it the last connection between us. I turned and walked away without a second thought. Jason, if you still acknowledge the friendship we once had, don't follow me. Jason stood frozen, his fists clenched so tightly that blood trickled down. But in the end, he didn't follow. Perhaps he didn't want to erase the last shred of goodwill between us. Seeing someone from my past left me feeling agitated. I went home and found my phone, which had been factory reset. I had accidentally dropped it and broken it on the day I transferred. Although I took it to a repair shop immediately, I couldn't avoid having all my data erased. That included George's and my family's phone numbers. I held the phone deep in thought. Jason came after me. Did George know? If he knew, what would he do? I hated having George in my life. He was always an unexpected variable, throwing everything off balance. I pursed my lips and blocked George's number. However, when I went downstairs to buy groceries, I ran into another unexpected person. Shane was standing downstairs from my grandma's apartment. I bit my lip, pulled up the hood of my sweatshirt, and slowly backed away. But he spotted me. Shane swept towards me like a whirlwind. Before I could retreat into the hallway, he grabbed my wrist and yanked me out. Shane didn't look so good either. His usually well-kept hair was longer, and a scruff of stubble had sprouted around his lips from stress. He said urgently, Miles, what are you doing hiding here? I glanced at him and shook off his hand. Shane, I transferred. What do you mean you transferred? He yelled, losing his temper. I don't pay attention to you for a few days and you run off. So what if you got beat up? I'll help you get them back later. His hand, hot as iron, clamped down on my wrist again, trying to drag me away. Come on, you're coming back with me. I stumbled. A cold laugh escaped my lips. Shane, I'm going back with you? What am I going back for? George is great. You have him, that's enough. I don't need to go back and be your backdrop. Shane's face turned livid. That's not what I mean. His lips trembled for a few moments before he finally choked out the words. Miles, I can't live without you. If I had heard that a few months ago, I might have felt a secret joy. But now, hearing it, I just felt indifferent. I looked up at Shane. His face was haggard, but it didn't hide his rugged good looks. But for the first time, he seemed like a stranger. My hero wasn't a hero. He was a coward. All I had ever yearned for was the silhouette of someone rushing in to save me. Could have been anyone as long as they could save me. But Shane had only gently pulled me up, only to throw me into deeper water. I punched him hard in the face. Shane, you're way too full of yourself. My punch stunned him. It seemed he never expected that a cornered rabbit would bite. What's more, I wasn't the old Miles anymore. My wrist was already red from his grip. I rubbed it gently. I suddenly waved to someone in the distance. A short distance away, the security guard who had been teaching me martial arts for the past few months hurried over. I looked down at Shane. Shane, take your delusions and get lost. After watching the security guard escort Shane to the police station, I pulled up my hood again and walked several hundred yards. When I reached a deserted spot, I said slowly, "Come on out." Evan, his face displeased, slowly emerged from nearby. "You saw me," he said, stating a fact. I nodded. "Saw you from upstairs." Evan stood there, the wind rustling his dark hair but failing to move his cold expression. I suddenly realized he looked a bit like Frank. I asked him, "Evan, I don't think we have any connection. So why did you follow me here?" Evan fell silent. His tightly pressed lips parted, and he suddenly uttered a few words. "Summer, convenience store, save me." I stared at him, and from those fragmented words, I pieced together a much older memory. Seemed that deep in my memory, Frank wasn't the only child the trafficker had kidnapped that day. The one huddled in the corner, too scared to speak, was Evan. This time it was my turn to be silent. But I slowly said, "It was nothing. Don't worry about it." With that, I intended to walk around him and take another path. But Evan blocked my way completely. He whispered urgently, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." I knew he was talking about his indifference towards me in the classroom. I raised my eyes and studied Evan's features carefully. The Ice Prince was indeed someone everyone looked up to. So even his apology was delivered from on high. I curved my lips and once again walked around him. "It's okay. It's not like I care anyway." Not far away, a Maybach had been parked silently for a long time. The window rolled down, revealing Frank's impassive face in the night. But because of the light from a nearby neon sign, his gaze on me was surprisingly moving. He said to me, "Let's go." I looked at him, nodded, and got into the car. And so, I missed the pitch black, lifeless look he shot at Evan. As the night wind flowed past, I asked Frank, "What are you doing here?" He was wearing a watch on his pale wrist and was working on a worksheet. Hearing me, he smiled, "Just passing by." I then realized he had changed his clothes. Frank at night was a little different from Frank during the day. His expression was calmer, his dark eyes held more fatigue. The light flickered, casting shadows on his brow, giving him the indifference of someone in a position of power. I subconsciously said, "Then I won't bother you." He chuckled. "He canceled his plans tonight just to block you. Why not do the opposite and avoid him completely?" I hesitated, then nodded. Frank took me to a club on the outskirts of the city. The club was lavishly decorated, seemingly catering exclusively to rich kids like them. He changed into a racing suit, and when he turned back to call me, I almost didn't recognize him. I sat there, looking up at Frank in a daze. He already had a good figure, and the solid black racing suit made his shoulders look even broader and his legs longer. Streamlined, but with a sense of power. Some of Frank's dark hair fell, hiding his impassive eyes. He no longer had his usual gentleness, his eyes flickered with a certain ferocity. But that ferocity was forcefully suppressed when he saw me. He nodded at me, "Follow me." I pursed my lips and followed him. After passing through several doors, we finally saw a wide open mountain road. A cool-looking race car was parked quietly to the side. Leaning against it was a cool, handsome young man. When they saw Frank and me, their eyes lit up. Frank. When they saw me, their voices involuntarily softened. "Hey there." Frank glanced at them, his eyes sharp. He said, "Didn't you say someone was here to race? Where are they?" The young man sked. "Heard it's a few guys from the next city over. Insisted on racing you." Frank said, "Then let them come." The young man smiled. "They're already here. Look over there." He pointed. On the other side of the track, a few figures were indeed walking towards us. Even if a rich kid isn't classically handsome, years of pampering give them an air of extravagance. But I recognized the person leading the group at a glance. George. My eternal nightmare, George. The inescapable George. As George got closer, he saw me, and his red lips curved into a smile. "Brother." He stood there, the emotions in his eyes flickering like exploding fireworks. There seemed to be a deeper feeling suppressed within. I clenched my fists, then slowly relaxed them. "George." He leaned in close, blowing a breath of air on my earlobe. "Brother got a haircut." His dark eyes reflected my wary expression. George suddenly laughed softly and put a hand on my shoulder. "Brother, do you know how to race?" Of course I didn't. Unlike George, who had a large inheritance from his biological father to squander, I was just an ordinary person. Admitting your own inadequacies in public is a very difficult thing, because it means tearing open your own heart, showing all your struggles to others. The old me would have been in pain, but I had figured it out. In the night wind, I gave George a small smile. My tone was already carefree. "I don't." George seemed stunned. His slanted eyes widened in surprise. He looked at me and suddenly smiled. "What am I going to do?" "Brother, I think I like you even more now." Just then, Frank suddenly threw his keys to the guy next to him. He stepped forward, standing in front of me, separating me from George. "Didn't you want a race? I'll race you." On the mountain road, 2 cars sped off. The smell of burning rubber hung thick in the air. A tense atmosphere spread across the whole venue. Frank's friend exclaimed, "It's been a while since Frank has gone this hard." A moment later, he shook his head and sighed. "This George guy is really something. His technique is average, but he's got guts. He drives like he has a death wish." I didn't understand racing, nor did I understand the technical terms he was using. I just stood by the windy mountain road, watching in the dark night as the car's headlights streaked and collided like meteors. They were racing for me. Frank was always a good person that was easy to guess. But George, why was George racing for me? I watched the bright red car recklessly speed around the mountain road, drifting towards us. I suddenly remembered the first time I saw George. He had reached out his hand to me, seemingly approachable. But the elegance in his every move was impossible to hide. I heard my stepmom was a singer. George, taught by her, also had a refined air. But that kind of elegance can't be bought without money. I later found out that George's biological father was a wealthy man, and he had been raised very well for the past 10+ years. But why would a person like George be willing to be a son of the chief family? And why would a stepmom like her have chosen my dad? I had asked my stepmom this question before. She just laughed softly. "Because George likes you a lot, and your father is a very faithful man." I only remembered the second sentence. I had forgotten the first. "George likes me?" The bright red car suddenly drifted to a perfect stop. The door opened, and George stumbled out, a cut on his forehead. Blood trickled down, but it didn't mar his beauty. He looked at me, his eyes burning like fire, with a morbid and obsessive intensity. This was the first time I had really looked into George's eyes. His eyes were like a cat's, round and bright. When he smiled, they usually looked like crescent moons filled with clear water. But now, for the first time, I saw the deeper emotion in his eyes. Love. I nodded at George, gesturing for him to come over. Frank's gaze swept over. I shook my head, telling him not to worry. George's adrenaline was pumping from the race, his pupils slightly dilated with excitement. I took him to a deserted spot, I said, George, do you like me? It was a probing question, but George answered without hesitation. He smiled at me, the blood on his face a vivid red. Yeah. Brother, you're just figuring that out? I can only fall asleep at night if I'm next to you. Those few months when you weren't with me, I almost went crazy. George slowly moved closer, the corners of his mouth curving up, but his eyes were filled with a dark, obsessive grip. Brother, how could you leave me? I looked at him, my feelings complicated. My suspicion was confirmed, but I wasn't happy. I looked at George and slowly said, George, did you know I was being bullied? George said, of course. I told Shane not to step in. I said my brother hates being disturbed. I said, did you know I was being isolated? George said, it's better if I'm the only one around you, brother. You don't need so many people. I said, did you know Jason verbally abused me? George slowly smiled, a sweet smile. Yeah. I planted the idea in his head. My brother doesn't need a childhood friend who's been around for so many years. I couldn't take it anymore. I reached out and shoved him hard. George, you're a psycho. Using love as an excuse with extreme arrogance. I pushed George aside. He hit his head on the wall, and the bleeding got worse. I watched him coldly. If this is what you call love, then it just makes me sick. With that, I turned to leave without a second thought. But before I had taken a few steps, there was a loud sound from behind me. George had slapped himself. He knelt on the ground, a bright red handprint on his beautiful, ruined face, his expression crazed. Brother, he called to me. Brother, do you remember when I asked if you knew what that medicine was? He held up the pills that had spilled from his pocket. Those red and white pills, mixed with dirt, were being swallowed down in large mouthfuls. George laughed through his tears. That's the medicine I took at the mental hospital. Miles, I can't last a single day without you. George was sick, literally. He had a severe mental illness. After rushing him to the hospital to have his stomach pumped, I called my stepmom. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then my stepmom's tired voice came through. She said, Miles, I'm sorry. I said, it's okay. It's okay. We won't see each other again anyway. My stepmom told me she would take George away for treatment. She would watch him closely and not let him come find me. Maybe I believed her, maybe I didn't. But it didn't matter. Next spring, I would continue learning martial arts from the security guard. What I believe is that good will always triumph over evil. After taking care of everything, Frank and I walked outside. After a busy night, it was now dawn. The sun rose from the distant horizon, gently and lovingly casting its light on every corner of the city. The rising red sun, a symbol of infinite hope. The huge billboard in Crestwood had been updated with a new theme. The black-haired boy from the comics smiled gently at everyone, and 1,000 rays of light fell around him, like a rebirth. On the giant screen, there was a name and a message. A rose isn't a rose the moment it sprouts. A swan isn't a swan the moment it's born. In our lives, we all have to walk through a silent childhood, a transformative youth, and many confusing days mixed with darkness and light before we can become our true selves. Wishing you the strength to cross mountains and seas and be reborn. Epilogue. George was old. He sat in a wheelchair, one hand tightly clutching a photograph. He held it close, refusing to show the nurse, just smiling. This is the one I love. The nurses were used to him. After all, even though he had been discharged years ago and had found success in the business world, he was still, at his core, a madman. But today seemed a little different. The nurse said, George, you have a visitor. George clutched the photo in surprise and looked up. Who is it? Is it Miles? It's me. The visitor put down a bouquet of flowers and sat across from him. It was Frank, his hair streaked with gray, his expression calm. Miles is dead. George froze. But soon, his eyes flashed with excitement. How? Did he curse my name as he died? He hates me, which means he loves me. If he loves me, that's enough. Frank cut him off cleanly. He died peacefully. He didn't forgive you, but he didn't curse you either. We loved each other very much. I spent 10 years healing him, so the last few years of his life he was very happy. In his final moments, He held my hands tightly and said, "Frank, I hope I meet you in the next life." George's eyes widened. His youthful beauty was gone. His expression was now just tragic. Frank said softly, "George, love is an oppression. You were so incredibly wrong." After saying this, he didn't stay. As Frank walked out of the room, he heard George's hysterical screams from behind. He had heard similar sounds from Shane, Jason, and Evan. After Miles died, he had notified every one of them. Each of them had acted so regretful, so broken. But the wind leaves no trace, and the hurt is forever carved in the heart. Frank's aged fingers brushed the white flower on his suit lapel. The pale sunlight streamed over the mountains, reminding him of Miles's gaze, which was just as gentle and melancholic. A sigh echoed in the empty courtyard. Frank walked out of the asylum. "Miles, I'll see you in the next life."